first summer road trip. Service vehicle soon. See that? See that? I got service vehicle soon. Hey everyone, so without further ado and suspense, I want to let you know we did actually get home from LA, but I've actually waited a while to make this video and probably procrastinated a while because I wanted to kind of have some perspective before making it. There's a lot of bad things that happened over the past couple months with my Mach-E where it bricked and stranded us twice. The first being in my garage and the second being on our way to LA after applying what we thought was a recall that would keep us safe and not have this fail on us. So we're first going to go through the experience both times my high voltage junction box failed in my car. I then want to go through kind of what actually has failed and what the role of the junction box is in the car. And third, I want to go through kind of my thoughts after this whole experience. First, let's go back to our story in LA. All right, hey, we were traveling over the mountains going into LA, driving between 75 and 80 miles an hour, keeping up with traffic, and just not driving very aggressively at all with the family in the car. And the car all of a sudden did the following. We got a service car soon or something like that, and a wrench, which you see down here. And my power is ridiculously limited right now, if you see that there. When I read the codes, I have a code which is P0ADA, Hybrid Battery Positive Contactor, Control Circuit Range Performance. So it's clearly limited power because of the positive contactor. Not good. Not good at all. So I have power still. The car hasn't stopped completely, but it's going to be a real slow ride to get into LA and then to get my car serviced.
Many minutes later.
So we made it to our hotel, driving on local roads, 44 miles in an hour and a half in LA. Didn't use much power to get to the hotel, so I don't think I further damaged whatever contactors are damaged. So that's the latest update. My family at least is safe and in the hotel where we're parked right now. I have not turned my car off since I've gotten the error, or since I got the warning with the wrench. So I am not turning this thing off, and my next trip will be driving slowly to the dealer where we're going to hopefully leave this and hopefully get some kind of a rental car over the July 4th weekend. So, great road trip. So wound up being able to drive the car to Bob Wondry's Ford in Alhambra, California, about 15 minutes away from my hotel, and left it with them. They didn't seem very happy to see me and certainly weren't very pleasant in terms of customer support. I did pull some strings through folks I met on the internet from Ford, and was able to get the part rushed to the dealer and get the dealer to have this on a high priority to get it fixed in a week's time. I think without the strings that honestly I was able to pull on the internet, it would have been 2 weeks easily before the car is fixed, if not more. And I would have been flying home and had more of a disaster with my family. But we were able to get the car fixed in a week, and so far it seems like the fix has held over several thousand more miles. But the customer support from the dealer and also just the appearance of the dealer, it looked like, I mean, from the 1950s, everything was open. The lounge for customers looked like a taco stand. And again, as I said, they were very lacking in terms of customer service and touch points. They didn't want to hear from me. I had to go there and take my car back after it was done. They kept me waiting for over a day and cost me an extra day in the hotel because they couldn't figure out how to close out the paperwork at the dealership. This wasn't the first time, as I mentioned, that I had my high voltage junction box contactors fail on me. Let's go back to the first instance, which was on April 3rd, 2022. So back in April, I was coming out on Sunday morning to charge my car because I forgot to charge it the night before. We had some things to do that day and I wanted to have a full battery. So I went out to my car and charged it, plugged it in, and then went in to make myself some coffee. When I was looking at my phone about an hour later, I noticed a notification from FordPass that there was a charging error. So then I went and looked at my car and I saw red rings next to the charger. Knew that wasn't good. I unplugged the charger, plugged it in again, same thing, red rings. Got into my car, turned it on, and I saw "Stop safely now." Of course, the car was already stopped safely in my garage. I looked, pulled codes on the car using an OBD2 reader, and saw that I had a positive contactor stuck closed. I then went on the internet and the Mach-E'S and found out that did not look good. I was not the only one to get this, and that my car needed to be towed to the dealer and the battery opened up. The car was nose in my garage, and that's actually a problem for Mach-E'S because you can only tow them from the front, not from the back. It has a lot of other holes underneath, but if you tow it from those holes, you risk weight of the holes not being able to hold up the winch in the car and braking and the car going off the winch. That's actually happened to other owners. I called Ford Roadside Assistance to tow the car, and it took about 2 hours to get a tow truck driver out. Ford Roadside and the tow truck driver were very non-communicative, and that theme continued when the driver showed up. Turns out the tow truck driver barely spoke English, didn't know right from left.
Toward you? Right. That's left.
Couldn't figure out how to say my left or his left. And we went through a really painful and dangerous process of him having me sit in my car and pushing my car out of my garage on a sloped driveway down to a busy street. He didn't tell me what he was going to do before he went ahead and did it, what his plan was, and wouldn't really communicate with me. All I know is that within 5 minutes of him getting there, he was pushing my car out of the garage with me in the driver's seat without a plan that I thought he was going to be telling me about. So I had to take control of the situation at some point because the car was out in the street blocking traffic and was about to be hit. So in the end, what I had to do is kind of do his job and tell him where to place his tow truck in my driveway and to winch the thing onto the truck using the approved winch points. So really wasn't a pleasant experience, and it's one of the major risks you have with the Mach-E and this contactor problem. If the contactors weld, you're gonna have to tow it to the dealership, and that's always kind of a risk and a wild card with the Mach-E because it's so tough to tow. So once it got to the dealership, it wasn't that bad. The part was actually overnighted to the dealership or was local to the area because not too many Mach-E's had started failing yet. And I was able to get it put into my car and got the car back within the week, which actually wasn't bad at all. The only problem was that set of contactors, that junction box, was another of the same part. And as became clear later on, it wasn't a manufacturing defect that caused the part to fail. It was actually a design defect, which meant that the replacement junction box was just going to fail again. So after my junction box was replaced, it seemed like more and more Mach-E's on the internet were failing, especially GTs and GT Performance Editions. And there were certainly rumors that there was going to be a recall and that the part was faulty in some way. Didn't know if it was manufacturing or if it was designed, but something was messed up. And so we decided as a family to really not use our Mach-E on anything other than local trips, and that I wouldn't be taking my kids somewhere on a long trip without it getting properly fixed. I didn't want to be stranded somewhere with my family waiting for a tow truck for hours. It just didn't seem like a good idea. So I now know a lot more about contactors and the high voltage battery junction box. So let me just say from the outset, the part that is problematic on these cars is called the high voltage battery junction box, or HVBJB. And this thing is defective on Mach-E's that are produced before May of 2021. So if you buy any Mach-E that's after May in terms of its build date, it has the new part in it that so far appears to not have this problem whatsoever. So if you're looking at a Mach-E, especially a used one, you want one after May, or else listen on. So you're looking at the top of my Mach-E. To the right is the front of the car, and to the left is the back of the car. And in the middle of those two motors, underneath the floor of where basically the passengers sit and part of the cargo area, is the battery pack. On the left side of the car, on the fender, in front of the driver's door and behind the front wheel is the charge port. Now, in order to really understand what's going on here, we have to delve a little bit into this battery pack some more. Now, the battery pack is screwed together inside of a sealed case, and in order to get at it, you have to lower it out of the car with some special tools and a lift. Here's actually what my car, Mach-E'S, looks like when it's on a lift and the battery pack is removed from it. And here's the actual battery pack in its casing itself from my car. Now, this high voltage battery junction box itself, essentially the junction box serves as the switches or the connectors between high voltage, very high voltage energy that's stored inside that battery and the rest of the car that needs that energy. So as you can imagine, in certain situations, such as if you're in an accident or the car is off, you want that battery to be disconnected from the rest of the car so that the car isn't energized and it doesn't pose a safety hazard. So that's kind of the role of the contactors and the junction box. It's to serve as the cut-through point between the energy that's in the battery and the rest of the car that needs that energy. All right, so with that background, let's look at this high voltage junction box itself. So I'm going to be simplifying all of the componentry in there to the ones that are mostly relevant to us. Here's actually what the thing looks like. It's a little bit more complicated, but there's a full teardown that I'll put a link to underneath. There are 6 components we want to look at. 2 sets of big contactors that handle high voltage. Those are carrying a fair amount of electricity. Also the ones to the right here, the plus and minus, which go to the DC fast charging port. That's going to be taking a lot of energy in potentially, and it's putting it into the battery rapidly. So what's basically happening is, especially the ones that go to the motors, the positive and negative contactors, those contactors have been getting damaged in the Mach-E. But these contactors themselves, the circular white things that serve as the connection point between the battery and the motors that are requesting hundreds of amps of power at a time, these contactors are getting damaged and are failing. And when they fail, bad things happen. So either they fail by getting stuck closed, so in other words, they get so hot, they actually weld closed and they can't disconnect once the car is off. When that happens, your car will operate normally until you turn it off. And then when you turn it back on the next time, it doesn't work at all. It gives you a stop safely now in your instrument cluster, and your car is bricked, and it's time to call for the tow truck. So that's what happens if it's stuck closed. And while that's a real major bummer and it can be a real pain in the butt, as I've described earlier in my video, it's not generally leaving you in a patently unsafe situation where you're in motion and worried about other cars hitting you. You might have some other problems, such as, well, I have my family with me or little kids and we need to get somewhere, or it's really hot or really cold out. That's happened to owners where they've either been in Canada in the middle of the winter time and it's been like -20 degrees and this has happened, or it's happened to people where they've been in the desert and it's been like 120 degrees and it's happened to them. Now, if they stick open, that's a really worrisome condition. It seems like, just from reports on the internet, that this is less likely to happen, but if and when it does happen, and it can happen, it's really bad. So in that instance, the contactors appear to like become warped in their shape, and that means that they kind of will pop open. So instead of remaining closed while the car is in motion and supplying the electricity, they actually pop open while you're driving. And that causes, as you can imagine, an immediate loss of locomotive power. That'll also produce a stop safely now in your instrument cluster, and hopefully you're in a place where you can stop safely without someone hitting you. But that sounds extremely dangerous and not too good. That actually is what's prompted the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration to start a safety investigation of this defective part, because there was no warning before you would lose locomotive power. So in both of these situations, before about May of 2022, earlier this year, you had no warning, and all of a sudden you'd be driving along and either your car would stop or you would park somewhere, especially on a road trip perhaps, and then you come back to your car and it wouldn't start. Sometimes these cars were left in situations where it was very tough to tow them because the owners didn't plan on towing them. And you have all sorts of other inconveniences and situations to think about if you have others with you and your car just stops working. All right, so faced with this difficulty, what did Ford do? Well, the first thing they did as an engineering team is they figured out that they had a problem, and they looked at the part. They probably took a ton of them apart when they failed, and they figured out what to do to fix the thing. And so now, if you get a Mach-E, as I mentioned, after May of 2022, or you get your high voltage battery junction box replaced now, you can't get a part that has the old defective design. You'll only get the new part now. So for cars produced after May and for repairs, they have a fixed part. They have a fix for this issue. But Ford also developed something else, which is a warning light that they delivered through software. So it throws this new diagnostic code or codes and displays to the driver, service vehicle soon. It shows up when the car detects that there is potential damage to one of the contactors. So if it does think you have damage to your contactors, it immediately limits your power to only 30% of normal when it comes to the GT models. This is what happened to me. I was one of the first people to get this new software with a warning light in my car. I didn't know what it did at the time. No one really did. But I was one of the first people, I think probably the first person in the world, to actually get this service vehicle soon that my contactors were damaged. When it did so, the car could maintain speed, but was pretty sluggish. It's a big change, especially if you have a GT Performance Edition, in terms of the amount of torque you have and the ability that you have to drive the car normally on a highway. Big contrast between before the warning light went on and when you have service vehicle soon. The other thing to mention here is when you do decide to service the vehicle soon and you take it to your dealer, the dealers are supposed to, when they see this code, it's very easy to read the code in the car. When they see the code, the dealer is, no ifs, ands, or buts, supposed to order right away a new replacement junction box. There's no other fixes they need to do, yet many dealers do not read the TSBs and the pronouncement from Ford, and claim not to know anything about this. And some of them just want to get out of doing the repair. Others, it gets worse. They actually try and do other diagnoses. First of all, they take the car and drive it for 60 miles. Some dealers even drove the car for 90 miles an hour to try and duplicate the error and to see if the code came back after clearing it. Other dealers just clear the code and they send you on your way saying, oh, doesn't show anymore. Everything's fixed. We updated your software. So dealers many times are not doing the right thing and aren't being consistent in following what Ford is telling them they should be doing to fix what is a serious problem in customers' cars. So the recall that happened was just to give you a warning light to tell you when your junction box was broken. But it doesn't do anything to get the dealer to do the right thing to actually replace your junction box. Moreover, you can't get a new junction box. You can't get the fixed part. You can't stave off being stuck somewhere or having your car stop while you're driving or getting only 30% of power in your car without warning. You can't forestall any of those bad things happening by taking it to the dealer and having them fix the defective part. Ford is requiring customers to have the part fail first in their car and be damaged before they're going to replace a defective part under warranty. They save about $2,000 for every car that they don't replace a junction box on. So in the meanwhile, they let customers drive around with some chance, probably non-zero, probably a pretty good chance if you have a GT or GT Performance Edition, a pretty good chance that this is going to happen to you. And then only when it fails will they replace your car's part. So after all this, people say, what do you think about the car? Well, Ford made a car that has a known defect in it that when it fails causes a catastrophic problem in the car. They're making people, owners of these first-year cars, have the car fail before they're really going to fix it. And when it does fail, the towing of the car is very, very tough to do. And you wind up at dealers many times who are set up to service really well a 1986 Ford Taurus SHO. But, you know, in the end, what do I think about the car? Well, Liz. What do I think? I still think it's a great car. I just wish Ford had made it a better product. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Have fun having adventures with your own car.